I've been waiting for you, friends.
Goldman!
Oh, no.
A few years back now, a company called Megapixel Studio and Forever Entertainment took a stab at remaking one of the all-time classic arcade shooters, House of the Dead. Something which was a pretty gargantuan task, given the cult status of that original, and also the fact that the source code was lost in time, like tears in rain. Which meant that it ended up pretty much exactly how you'd think it would, being more or less completely terrible, and an insult to rail shooters everywhere. So when I heard that they were doing the same thing for the sequel, The House of the Dead 2, arguably the superior game in almost every way, well, you can understand how I'd be skeptical.
How could anyone do this?
But then I finally got my hands on it, I played through it from start to finish a couple of times, and I can confirm that, yeah, nah, they stuffed up yet again. This thing sucks.
What's wrong with this city?
Again, it's one of those instances where something is so bad that it really ends up looking like one of those fake games you see people playing in the background of a TV show or a movie.
No one's gonna get away with this.
Now, I knew this thing wasn't going to be all that great for a couple of reasons. Obviously because the remake for the first game was pretty bad to begin with. But then also because I've been asking these guys for a review code for weeks and I was just constantly turned down. And I'm not trying to act like I'm YouTube royalty or anything. In fact, I'm pretty sure as far as YouTubers go, I'm a lowly peasant. But there is always a bit of a connection between whether or not devs like to send out early review codes and then the quality of the game itself. With codes being a lot more reserved if they know the game's not going to get the best reception. I mean, it's not written in stone that this always happens, but it is always a good rule of thumb. I mean, that was the case for stuff like Saints Row and more recently Mind's Eye. And yeah, lo and behold, it seems I was on the money because this thing has indeed turned out to be a complete disaster, sitting at mostly negative on Steam, last time I checked. And really the only shocking thing about that is that it's not overwhelmingly negative, which it should be.
I'm not gonna let you get away.
So seeing as these light gun shooters are really one of my all-time favorite genres, outside of first-person shooters, I thought it would be a really great idea to shell out my hard-earned dollary dues to see what the whole thing's about. If nothing else, so you don't have to. Thankfully, at least this ain't the longest game in the world and you can beat the whole thing in around half an hour, meaning it's really primed for being refunded once you've finished it. But even in that short amount of time, you're gonna quickly see here just how much of a mess this whole thing is.
Thank you. Please take this.
The term soul versus soulless gets thrown around a whole lot these days when talking about remakes, and I think this is definitely one of those instances where something truly epitomizes that saying. And this all honestly feels like what would have happened if someone had an AI program powerful enough to remake entire games on its own, and then someone just put in a few prompts here asking it to recreate the original House of the Dead 2. Then they plopped that result online and expected people to pay money for it.
Thank God you're all right.
What the hell's going on in the city?
What have you done?
I mean, to be fair, it's not like the original game is any kind of timeless masterpiece, but there was an understated charm to its simplicity and its schlock. And there's just something so comfortable about the basic mechanics and visuals of these old arcade shooters, back when gaming was just all about creating the most entertaining experience it could for the player, without feeling the need to interject personal opinions or politics into anything. It's a sequel to the original game following the outbreak at the Curian Mansion in House of the Dead 1. After the virus has now spread to Venice in Italy, and you're either playing as AMS agent James Taylor or Gary Stewart, ultimately investigating a dude named Goldman who's believed to be responsible for financing the experiments that have caused all of this, shooting lots of zombies along the way.
People of the AMS, I am Goldman.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's just about stopping an evil rich man who wants to take over the world. An evil rich dude who has some of the most unintentionally hilarious dialogue of all time.
To protect the life cycle.
And yet, even with a premise so simple, they again found a way to ruin it here. And we don't even really have to look all that far into the remake to see that either. I mean, let's just take a look at the first level as an example. Right, so for starters, instead of taking place during the day, it now seems to be taking place at nighttime, or at least much later on in the day when there's less light overall, which instantly just makes everything look dull and flat, also making the zombies kind of blend in with the background, which, doesn't help with visibility. Heading into that first church area, you'll also notice how the lighting is completely lacking. In the original, you can see light shining in from the outside, even casting shadows across the floor, which, despite obviously being baked in or a texture, still gave the environment way more appeal, making the whole thing really pop out. If you take the time to look around the room now, you'll even notice there's less props as well. In the original, you could see books piled up on the table, as well as extra chairs and even paintings hanging on the wall. Not to mention the pylons were far more detailed and ornate, compared to just being flat here in the remake.
That's a bloody outrage, it is!
There's also a lot of subtle changes which really ruin some of these smaller one-off sequences, like during this quick chat you had with G in the original, the whole thing's framed to show the window behind you, so that jump scare of the zombies bursting through would be a lot more cinematic and frightening, like an actual horror movie. Only here in the remake, that window is transparent, and during this dialogue, for some reason, the camera whips around to focus on G, with there then being like a full second or two when it then has to pan back to the window, really cheapening the build-up and the payoff. Reload! And again, just compare how dull and flat the image is of these zombies charging into the room compared to how it was in the old version. That's really the biggest issue this remake has too, is the complete lack of clarity and vibrancy, because it's clearly going for a shooter-realistic look as opposed to a more cartoonish art style. Only, that's the thing about the original game, man, while it might look very dated by today's standards, there's still a clear difference there between the enemies and the background, which is a crucial visual component so you can easily identify threats during all of this chaos. Here though, you've got the complete opposite, where everything just kind of blends together and you lose a lot of those visual cues. I mean, check out this whole sequence in the back alley as an example.
Reload!
Thank you.
Reload!
And then again during the first boss fight against this giant knight and that little gargoyle thing that flies around him. In the original, this little asshole was a noticeably brighter colour to the environment, really making him a lot easier to spot as he zipped all over the place. But here it's like they've all been put through the same brown colour palette that's been used as the template for every aspect of the presentation. They even make the same fuck up later on when you have to fight these guys again during a boss rush in the 5th level. And I've said this time and time again, but it's gonna never not baffle me how despite the further technology progresses, the less that game devs often seem to remember the basics of stuff like this, to be able to effectively communicate crucial information to the player. You remember in the old Time Crisis games how you'd have enemies wearing blue, red or brown uniforms and you'd immediately know what kind of threat they posed? Well, it'd be like if these guys remade Time Crisis for today using this House of the Dead remake format, you'd go up against brown, and brown soldiers.
Reload! Reload!
You notice too how when the zombies die in this, how they just kind of evaporate like they're demons turning into ash in Doom 3 or something? Whatever happened to that original gnarly effect where it looked like they were literally melting into their own bodily fluids? The other thing is that in the original game, it's very clearly raining, giving this whole opening level a much more atmospheric and depressing vibe. And here I think it still is, but you can barely notice those raindrops at all. Oh yeah, and if you want to go even deeper, how about we consider that they've technically censored this remake as well, removing those little kids who are getting attacked by the zombies, replacing them with fully grown adults, but then keeping in the same dialogue.
My dad's still inside!
What makes all of this even worse is that unlike the original game, the source code for House of the Dead 2 apparently still exists, really giving these guys even less excuses as to why the whole thing's turned out so poorly. And if you looked at this footage and assumed that it ran on the Unreal Engine, well, you'd be forgiven because it's actually Unity, but I'll admit, it does have that lifeless and unimaginative appearance that a whole bunch of UE4 and UE5 slop that releases these days seem to have.
Gary, back me up.
Things don't get any better in the second level either, and in fact, I think the visibility is even worse now because throughout all of this, it's somehow even darker. There's even a bit in this stage where there's more or less no light at all, and you're in complete darkness. It's like they just forgot to add in any light sources, like someone didn't even put them in there to begin with.
Help me!
Yeah, again, something the original never had an issue with. Even as something as simple as the boss falling back into the water when it's defeated somehow looks less impressive. In the original, it made this huge splash like it was finally getting sent back to the depths of hell where it belonged, completely riddled with bullets. But now it hits the water like it's an Olympic diver, barely disturbing the surface. And again, look, I'm not trying to act like that old game looks amazing by any stretch, and yeah, it absolutely looks like something from back in 1998, but you gotta give credit there where credit's due, in the sense that Sega really knew how to make an overall image visually striking and fun to look at. I mean, go and check out a bunch of the games they released on the Dreamcast, for instance, and you'll still notice how gorgeous they all look due to that reason. The other thing that's really worth bringing up at this point is how much they've ruined all of the cinematics and the voice acting. And yes, again, let's not pretend for an instant that the voice acting was any kind of good in that original. In fact, it's because of how bad it is that it's so charming and beloved. Goldman in particular has some of the schlockiest dialogue of all time, delivered in a way where it sounds like the voice actor for the character was also learning how to speak English at the same time.
I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. Can't you see?
So there was never not going to be any way that the voice acting in this remake was not going to be awful, which meant that the only way to truly make it work was to embrace it. Only somehow they found a way to make it even worse, and a lot of this stuff genuinely sounds like it could have been delivered by AI.
Yes, this is Amy. Yes, yes. It seems that Goldman left a message for us. Gary, come quickly. Something terrible is happening.
James, go and prevent the confusion in the city.
Okay.
And all of the cheese from that original is completely gone, especially with Goldman, who now speaks with a southern accent for some reason and is wearing sunglasses.
I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. Can't you see?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I mean, if you're going to recreate that kind of dialogue and just repeat it word for word without there being any shred of self-awareness, well, then you're just completely missing the point, man.
To protect the life cycle.
To protect the life cycle.
I will say though that on a positive note, at least the third level isn't completely terrible, and it's bright enough that you can see what's going on here. Mostly. There even seems to be some variation to the colour scheme instead of it just being brown upon brown upon brown. This is a pretty fun stage too, where you're moving about on a speedboat throughout the canals, stopping here and there to save people from getting attacked. Eventually going deeper underground, there's too much panic in this town, before then taking on the level boss named the Tower.
What is it?
Still though, while this level isn't as bad as those previous ones, it does again highlight a few moments of laziness and just visual oversights. Like how when you're shooting the zombies in the water, they just completely disappear, sinking down like they're barely even interacting with the surface at all. Whereas in the original, you'd see their blood floating on the top, along with all those little air bubbles showing you they'd carked it. Same thing when they'd leap out of the water to attack you, there'd be these huge splashes to really draw your eyes to where they were coming from. Whereas here, this is all gone. The boss fight is also kinda balked, and during the second phase, when it's swimming around this new area, it often goes off the screen when it's revealing its weak spot, so you quite literally can't even hit it before it attacks.
Reload!
But if all the previous levels before this were like a 2 out of 10, well, this is somewhere around a 5 out of 10. Kinda like your mum.
No more fooling around.
However, leave it up to these guys to stuff the whole thing up, because by the 4th level, they're back to their old tricks, with a return of not being able to see a fucking thing.
Can't see shit.
We're even more areas where it seems like the environment is completely covered in darkness, making it really challenging to spot the enemies. And the boss for this level also highlights that same issue. Now this was a really memorable little encounter where this thing chased you around this maze with a chainsaw held high above his head. And it was pretty harrowing seeing this humongous arsehole coming after you saw at the ready. Here though, because half the arena is lacking any kind of light source, you can barely see this guy for most of the fight, removing the frightening image of this lumbering psychopath. And I just don't get it. Like, how can they fuck up something so basic? How can something as simple as being able to make sure a boss enemy is lit properly be so challenging?
You're the one who's gonna get defeated, magician.
This sequence also highlights the absolute pinnacle of the whole soul versus soulless argument with the way they handle Goldman during this cinematic.
In time, You'll find out who's right.
Now in the original, during this bit where he talks to the player from this giant screen, you can very clearly see that it was the actual Goldman character model placed inside a box. Because maybe at the time they didn't know how to actually project a flat image of the guy, or I don't know, maybe it was less expensive on resources to have his model there as opposed to projecting it. Either way though, it looked incredibly silly, and like something out of a Zucker Brothers film. Now, because it's 2025 though, they've obviously been able to project that message properly, which, funnily enough, kind of ruins it. Because at least if they had kept it in, it would have shown that the devs actually acknowledged and were aware of how dumb that looked in the original. But the fact that they removed it really just shows how they're completely clueless in regards to the source material. You know, like they're the only ones that are not in on the joke.
This is a present from me to you.
And if you ever needed a better example of how little of a shit these guys gave to retaining the look, the feel and charm of the original, well, then yeah man, this is it.
No. Why?
As for the fifth level, well, that's just more of the same in the sense of a bunch of flat, bland environments to move through, changing the time of day yet again for seemingly no reason. The effect we get when one of those cloaked enemies appears is arguably worse looking now too, and even the different visuals during the rematch fight against the Magician somehow seem less impressive and creative. I mean, this guy went from looking like he was genuinely phasing in and out of reality, oops, there goes gravity, to now looking like he's leaving behind bits of Tinkerbell's pixie dust.
Reload!
Which was just another one of those instances of me being in complete amazement as to how Japanese game devs almost 30 years ago could pull off better looking effects with considerably weaker tech at their disposal.
Well, that was fucking dreadful.
Then the final level is a combination of every bad design and creative choice they've made so far, which just means more underlit environments where you can barely make out what's going on, along with laughably bad updated enemy models and effects.
Reload! Reload!
Along with, of course, more so bad that it's just bad voice acting, where they completely butcher more of Goldman's iconic speeches.
This is the final battle.
This is the final battle!
The sound mixing during the Emperor's introduction is way off as well, to the point that you can barely even hear what the guy's saying. Not to mention his voice is completely different too, really losing that inhuman tone and cadence.
I shall destroy and hate mankind. I shall destroy and hate mankind.
And if I wanted to be totally pedantic, which, yeah, I do, I'd also argue that his appearance is worse off than it was in the old game, but at that point, that'd just make me sound like a broken record. If there is one positive thing to say at this point, though, it's that finally, this whole thing has come to an end. With that cinematic of Goldman committing suicide by jumping off the building. Lol.
Farewell, friends.
But the remake still had one last middle finger to give me during the score screen where it censored me when I tried to add in the word sucks as my name. Because apparently the word sucks is too rude and has to be covered up. Wow.
Every time I come in the kitchen, you in the kitchen.
Now look, I don't want to be a hopelessly negative asshole here, and I will say that I do like a few things here. I mean, for starters, I like how you can save your progress in between each chapter, on the off chance you don't want to play through the entire campaign in a single sitting. I do like as well how the game includes that very important option for automatic reloading, so I don't have to mash the right mouse button every 2 seconds. And if you want to play this game with manual reloading turned on, then by all means, be my guest. But it was never a game designed to be fair, so at least having the game reload for you, whilst not magically fixing things overall, it does make it slightly less frustrating.
Reload! Reload!
Another good feature is how you can choose between listening to that awesomely cheesy original soundtrack, but then also swap it over to the new remix, which, I'll be honest, I didn't hate. And while it does sound super cheaply produced, then again, so did the old version. So I think out of all the things worth complaining about with the remake, the music ain't one of them. Other than that though, well, that's about it.
Man committed a sin, disturbing the life cycle of nature.
It's not helping either that, much like the original game, there's really not that much content all up here to begin with. I mean, all you really got here is the old arcade mode and then an original mode. But as far as I can tell, the only real difference is that in original mode, you can find hidden weapons in the levels, like an assault rifle. Plus, there also seems to be more items placed around the environment. Other than that, they're both really just the same and hardly likely to keep you interested for all that long. Oh yeah, and sadly too, I realised that during the time I spent with this, I ended up going past that window to get a possible refund. But if you just really wanted to play through this with a mate to see how bad things could actually be, well, you can easily do that and still have plenty of time left over to spare. But then again, you and a mate could also go smoke rocks or throw bricks at police cars, and I'd argue you'd have more fun of a time. So if you want to play the best version of House of the Dead 2 in 2025, the overall verdict is that this isn't it.
The state of this city's too much.
Short of actually finding a working version of it in the arcade somewhere, I'd say the version for the Nintendo Wii is by far your best bet. And the fact that the Wiimote with the right attachment still functions as more or less a classic light gun setup, not to mention it works on modern TVs, will give you a far superior experience, in regards at least to what you'd get on the PC with this remake. Maybe by the time the inevitable House of the Dead 3 remake comes around, they might have learned from their mistakes here, but sadly, I doubt it.
It's finally over. Goldman, I don't care if a successor comes or not. I'll go on fighting. To protect the life cycle.